That is such a awesome intro cartoon, Billy. I'll give you a hat tip. I'm Theo Greminger. I'm here always with Billy Muzio, who's wearing some festive attire today for 420. I don't know what 420 even is, but it's Billy, you look quite festive. And we have one of our favorite guys in the studio today, Jared Smola. If you don't follow him now, he's just a fantastic follow on Twitter. And the work you're putting out with Draft Sharks is just tremendous, Jared. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about what you're putting out in terms of the projections, the written content, and also the great podcasts you guys have been putting out?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I feel ready to talk to you guys because I have completed my initial 2023 projections, which was, basically the better part of my life for the past month or so. Deep dive, and I know Billy does these too. He knows how it goes. Deep dive in every team, the coaching tendencies, the personnel, play volume, run pass split, all that fun stuff that kind of spits out these player projections, which I think are so important to do in fantasy football. And for us at Draft Sharks, what those projections fuel is our draft war room, which if you're not familiar, this is going to, take those projections, apply them to your league's exact scoring rules. So if you're playing FFPC, if you're playing NFFC, whatever it is, it's going to take those projections, apply them to that scoring system, spit out customized rankings for you. And then, during the draft, we call it a dynamic MVP value because these rankings are changing throughout the draft based on your team needs, based on ADP, based on what's still available at every position. So it's a super powerful drafting tool that I use every time I draft, and it's up and running now that our projections are ready for the season.
I really enjoy it. And it also, you guys do a kind of a draft plan article that comes out later in the summer. Is that you and Matt, or is that more of a collective team effort?
It's collective. We're basically looking at that draft forum and sort of seeing the results it spits out and just putting that in written form because people like to read it. They like to have it by their sides when they draft.
No, it's great. You guys definitely do some quality work. But one article that might be the highlight of the year that you put out is after you do the projections, you do the most important things I learned from it. How many numbers did you reach on your written article for that one? It was like 100 and something, right, Jared?
It's 105 this year. It was 102 last year. It's not pre-planned. It's literally I just jot down stuff I think is interesting as I'm going through these projections, and whatever the final number ends up being, that's what it is.
Why don't you share a few and you tweeted out 10 of them. Why don't you share just a couple that you're into? And I'd like you to start with Drake London, a guy that Billy and I are both high on.
Yeah. London was better over the second half of his rookie season than the first by basically any metric you look at. Now, people have, correctly pointed out that Kyle Pitts was not on the field for most of the second half of that season. So that, I think, at least partly explains why London's volume climbed. He saw a 28.7% target share over the second half of last season. But it wasn't just the volume. It was, yards per target, yards per outrun, 2.19 yards per outrun for Drake London over the second half of the season. That's an awesome number for any player, especially a rookie. So it was a super encouraging rookie season for Drake London. I think we all know that, but we can definitely, put some numbers to it.
How about your Amon-Ra St. Brown takeaway? I love this one.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all know he's seen awesome volume, basically from the final, 6 or so games of his rookie season. But I think it's even overlooked a bit because he's missed some games and parts of games with injuries. If you just look at his last 20 healthy games, Amon-Ra St. Brown has averaged 10.3 targets per game on a 29.6% target share. That is like elite. That's like, Devontae Adams level volume from this guy.
Where does he come in inside of your rankings, wide receiver rankings this year? Would you mind sharing some of those projections? Because when I first ran my projections, he came in actually like ahead of AJ Brown in my rankings, ahead of Devontae Adams, and I scaled it a little bit, but part of me wants to go back and put him back where I had him. Like I currently have him as wide receiver 9. He was wide receiver 7 in my first run. When I take a look at that division, the NFC North, I have him projected for 27.5% target share. It's 161 targets. Roughly have him at and this is down from his expected catch rate because I don't think that his catch rate is sustainable right now, but I dropped him down to a 68% catch rate, 108 receptions, a little over 1,100 yards and 8 scores. Is that in the ballpark you have him at? Do you have that information readily available?
Yeah, and I can share all this stuff, whatever we want to talk about. I have Amon-Ra St. Brown as my wide receiver 7. It sounds like I kept him where he came out for you initially. I have him 1 point ahead of Devontae Adams in PPR, and then AJ Brown is like 4 or 5 points beneath those guys. And I'm fine. I'm not going to argue if anyone wants to take Devontae Adams over Amon-Ra St. Brown, but for now I'm sticking with this ranking. And yeah, my numbers are pretty close to what you have, Billy. The other kind of sneaky thing with Amon-Ra St. Brown is he adds a little production on the ground too.
Yeah.
He had 61 yards and a score rushing as a rookie, despite not being a full-time player that entire season. Then he had 9 carries for 95 rushing yards last year. I mean, it's micro stuff, but that stuff matters when we're, splitting hairs between someone like St. Brown and Devontae Adams.
Yeah, I have him for like 2% of the rushing share now, which is a little over nine rushing attempts. I have for like 87 yards and I think like half a score on the ground. Last year,
Jared, you actually came on the Goat District pod with me, and you were pounding the table for Dallas Goedert. You had him last year. I believe you had him ahead of Kittle, and that was kind of like your flag plant. This year, you're also, your data is really, making me not like Kittle right now. What's the takeaway you have? I didn't like reading this, Jared.
Yeah, I've been anti-Kittle for a couple years now. It's worked out a little. It didn't work out at the tail end of last year. The tail end of last year, the touchdown barrage he went on was just insane. Like, I think that's kind of overinflating his value at this point.
You get that great head start, though, with Dallas Goedert, though. Like, it was like people have to, when you look at the final season scoring versus contextualizing it over, how your team did, being able to start the year like 6-1 absolutely matters in terms of what you do waiver wire wise. So maybe you could share the takeaway here on George Kittle's target share.
Yeah, so my Kittle note was, 2021, he had a 21.9% target share. That sunk to 18.7% over the course of the entire 2022 season. But if you look at the 7 games that Kittle played with a healthy Deebo Samuel plus Christian McCaffrey, just a 15.6% target share. So I have serious volume concerns for Kittle this season with Deebo there and McCaffrey now there for a whole season. Ayuk there, assuming he doesn't get traded. And then on top of that, you have all the quarterback questions in San Francisco. So Kittle right now, I have him tight end 9 in my rankings. Based on these projections, I might come up a little bit from there, but he's not a guy I'm going to be getting a whole lot of at cost.
How does that projection change for you if Purdy was healthy enough to start week 1? We saw him kind of rely on him in a lot of big ways. If we found out, and this is, of course, let's just, in a hypothetical world, let's say that news broke today, Purdy's healthy, and we knew he was starting week 1. Where does Kittle move in your rankings?
Yes, I have Kittle for an 18% target share right now. So I'm not like going with that 15.5% that he saw in those 7 games with Deebo and McCaffrey. I think he's going to see more than that. The thing that would change for me if we were assuming that Purdy was going to be under center the entire season, I would bring San Francisco's pass rate up a decent amount. That would just, more targets for the entire team. Kittle would definitely rise. He could, the gap between Kittle and even my tight end 6 is only 9 points. So like if I made that change with Purdy, Kittle could pretty easily get up to tight end 6 for me.
That's about where I have him.
And then Jared, you also do a comeback player of the year article in Draft Sharks and a breakout player of the year article in Draft Sharks. And a couple of years ago, you did pretty well with maybe you could just share your back-to-back comeback players of the year, because they both hit pretty well.
Yeah, 2 years ago was Cooper Kupp, and that was probably the best call we've had at Draft Sharks since I've been there. Last year was Saquon Barkley. That was a hit. That one almost felt too easy. Like, I know, we have to cater to some of the less serious players as well. So I'm sure it helped them more than, because I know in high stakes leagues, Saquon was a back end of the first round pick by the time we got to August, but that was obviously a nice hit too. That one was just easy for me. Like, we know the talent is there. The guy just said to stay healthy, and he did, and he smashed last year.
Yeah, they invested in the O-line last year. It was my comeback player of the year last year as well.
Yeah,
and said one of my articles. So I fully agree there.
Is that an article where you're doing that solo, or is that a team collective effort? And are there a couple candidates right now that do you guys start early on this one?
There are definitely collective efforts, and there's a lot of back and forth, to put it nicely, when we're trying to decide on those. We haven't talked about this year's picks yet. We usually we all get together for the NFL draft, so we'll get together next Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We'll start to hash some of that stuff out then.
Awesome. Well, we highly recommend Jared's work over at Draft Sharks, and definitely check out the pods as well. And we're going to get into this offseason and really, really hit it after a word from one of our sponsors.
Hey, it's the Podfather. Now, in the offseason, I get into baseball, I get into basketball, and my preferred platform to play fantasy sports is Rival Fantasy, because Rival Fantasy has challenges where you can just take a guy and say, hey, this guy's going to score more fantasy points than this guy. They put 2 shortstops together, pick one. Point guards, pick one. Spoiler alert, you should pick Damian Lillard. Or they have the fantasy book where you can pick over, under, and up to 5 guys. And then the more you pick, your potential payout quickly escalates. And finally, I submit a bingo card because you can just go over, under across the board, get your fantasy bingo card set, submit it. I'm not the biggest basketball or baseball expert, but I have a hell of a lot of fun playing fantasy sports on rivalfantasy.com. And the best part is with promo code PLAYER, they refund up to $50 of any losses. So the promo code there is PLAYER on rivalfantasy.com. Go have some fun.
So, Billy, to keep with today's theme, we've had sort of high expectations for some of these running backs who've changed places this year. We talked with Mike Leone last week, and we talked with Derek Brown about the same subject matter because it's, Billy and I we've really enjoyed talking about it because you can kind of galaxy brain your way to thinking a lot of these guys kind of landed pretty well. Where are you at, Jared? Where's your favorite running back landing spot that kind of gets you excited? And maybe share 2. I think one of them is kind of low-hanging fruit, but there's a couple of them you can make an argument for.
Well, I'm curious to know who the low-hanging fruit is now.
It's David Montgomery for me.
Okay, yeah. He'd be the second guy on my list here. You used the word excited for this question, so that's sort of what I went with. And this probably isn't the wisest guy to invest in, but it's a guy I'm excited about. It's Rachaad Penny in Philadelphia.
You took mine.
Okay, good, cool, perfect. Listen, I mean, we all know about the injury stuff, and who knows? Maybe he ends up playing 4 games again this season. But when the guy has been healthy, he's been awesome. Career 5.7 yards per carry. That's second best among 96 running backs with 200 plus carries since 2018. Penny was 5th among 67 qualifiers in PFF's elusive rating last year. He was 1st among 77 qualifiers in 2021. And now he lands in a great spot in Philadelphia, a team that is still going to be run leaning. The O-line is still going to be awesome this coming season. Miles Sanders just finished running back 15 in PPR points in Philly last season. I think Penny is a much more talented runner than Miles Sanders, so I think he could finish at least that high if he stays healthy this season.
Billy, anything to add? I think that's a really interesting take about the pure talent standpoint. That's a great take. I mean, he's been so had so many injuries to deal with, but coaches can never move on from Rachaad Penny. It's that's a sign of a super, super talented guy. And he had early draft capital as well. Billy, your thoughts?
Yeah. So Jared hit on a lot of the points, but when you look at just his last 2 years, he's over 6 yards a carry. And I know it's a limited snap share or limited rushing attempts. It's a little over 160 rushing attempts, but he was the RB1 down the stretch in 2021, the year Jonathan Taylor, broke out and went nuts and was the first round draft pick in fantasy. And I mean, Penny was running back 1 during that time span. He outproduced Jonathan Taylor. The question is not about talent with Rachaad Penny. It's always been about health. And now he gets to run behind arguably the best offensive line in football, where he's not going to be taking, immediate hits past the line, where he could potentially, prolong his health a little bit further in the season. I know that's going to be, a big assumption, hoping that Rachaad Penny stays healthy. But if he does stay healthy, he's the type of back that has legit RB1 upside inside this offense, especially with the game scripts and what they're going to see from a positive pace of play for the running backs. Since Jared talked about Penny, I'll shift gears here and talk about Damian Harris. I like the landing spot for him. I mean, we take a look at what this team has done. They've lacked an inside runner. They've lacked somebody to run between the tackles and to get goal line touches. I think Damian Harris brings that skill set over to this team. He also has the ability to catch the ball, so they're not going to be telegraphing their plays per se with, Cook on the field versus Harris on the field. It's going to open up a lot of opportunity for him. We know this team needs to have another playmaker, right? Gabe Davis wasn't it last year. We still to be seen if he's going to be able to do it in 2023. But I think we see a little bit more balanced attack, and they don't just completely rely on Josh Allen this year in 2023. They're going to have to be, in my opinion. And I think by them bringing in Damian Harris, it allows them to be able to have a more balanced attack and not have to rely on Cook, who, in my opinion, frame probably not going to be well to withstand 230, 240 touches in a season. So Damian Harris, in my opinion, the landing spot is perfect for his skill set. Should see a good, game script and be able to really kind of elevate his game here in Buffalo.
Jared, your thoughts on Damian Harris? Because I'm interested to see, you're an upstate New York guy. We talked with Billy and I were kind of having this conversation where it seems like they fundamentally need a kind of a second fiddle to Stephon Diggs in that offense. Mm-hmm. The balance approach just doesn't seem to be cutting it. You saw them exposed last playoffs. I'll have a twofold. Your thoughts on the Buffalo running back situation, and then which would be the second Buffalo Bill besides Stephon Diggs if you could roster one of them?
Yeah, so I think Harris is an upgrade over Devin Singletary. I mean, my eyes tell me that, and the numbers tell me that. Harris has beat Devin Singletary in rush yards over expected per attempt in each of the last 3 seasons now. Now, what's keeping me from getting too excited about Harris in fantasy is, one, I don't know how much he's going to do in the passing game. Now, Allen doesn't throw to his running backs much in general, and then when he does this season, it might be Cook taking most of that. And then 2, is Allen gonna let Harris have some of these goal line touchdowns, right? And the talk in Buffalo offseason has been Allen running less, at least a little less, protecting his body a bit more as he gets older. I don't totally buy into that. I mean, I think once the games start and the bullets start flying, it's such a big part of his game. I don't know, but if Harris can just siphon 2, 3, 4 rushing touchdowns, from Josh Allen, he could easily score 10 or 12 times. And if he does that, he's going to be, a big value at his current cost.
And just your thoughts on James Cook, because I'll take a devil's advocate approach. I think maybe this makes James Cook a little bit more affordable because, the perception of the split backfield. But that was a guy whose talent I liked last year. I think he flashed at times. Obviously, the final numbers weren't anything great, but I do believe in the talent. Do you think do you disagree with me on that? Or is that?
I like the talent. I never liked the landing spot for him. And it's for, that reason I mentioned that Allen just hasn't, mobile quarterbacks in general. I mean, we know they don't throw to running backs as much, right? Because they're taking off and running rather than checking down. Now Buffalo can design stuff for Cook in the passing game, and they should, because they spent a second round pick on him and he is good in the passing game, right? But I always saw him as someone who, and I think Billy alluded to it, he's not going to get huge volume, right? You're hoping for 8 carries per game, then a bunch of work in the passing game. And I'm not sure I like his chances of getting huge volume in the passing game in Buffalo.
Well, let's just hope that it's not a 3-man split with Nyheim Hines just kind of messing everything up. And let's hope at least it's a 2-man split, and then we can kind of, take shots on that, because it is going to be a very good offense again. 2 players that changed hands this offseason from the pass catching perspective are DJ Moore in Chicago and Darren Waller in New York. Billy and I have talked at length about Darren Waller and our expectations for him this year. We're bullish on the situation. Your thoughts on how Waller's going to do? You have a lot of familiarity with Brian Daboll and how you think he'll do in his offense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little lower than consensus on Darren Waller at this point. I think, he turns 31 in December. We
tight
think
ends,
him as
though.
a younger.
Yeah, that's like a baby for a tight end.
That's like it's like a fine wine. It's a fine wine,
Yeah. And for me, if you look at stuff like Pro Football Focus receiving grades and yards per out run, he was elite for a 3-season stretch from, what would it be, 2018 to 2020. But the last 2 years, he's been good. He hasn't been great. And I know he had a bunch of injuries last year. Maybe you can blame it on that. Or maybe, again, like I said, he's 31. So maybe he is on the decline. I like the landing spot. I'm a big fan of Brian Daboll. There are a bunch of bodies in the Giants wide receiver core, but no one I'm worried about. I mean, Waller, I'd consider him the favorite at this point to lead the Giants in targets per game. There's obviously not many tight ends you can say that about. So I'm still trying to figure out exactly where I land on Waller. I have no issue with where he's priced in drafts right now, but I guess I don't see him as a screaming value at ADP at this point.
Where do you have him in target share for the team? I mean, the tight end last year was just a thorn in general from a rankings and projection standpoint.
Yeah.
When we look at his target share this year, like I have him at 18%, which this team doesn't throw a lot to begin with, but you alluded to the receivers being less than competent. Hodgins, Paris Campbell, Sterling Shepard, Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton, Jamison Crowder. I think 4 of those names might get 16 games combined out of them, right? where if he landed somewhere where they have more weapons, I'd probably be less high on him. I think I have him as tight end 6 right now. So I am a little higher, but I'm not as high as I've seen in the industry. But I'd be curious on what your target share distribution is.
Yeah, so I have Waller tight end 8. I have him above Kittle. I have him behind David Njoku and Pat Freiermuth. But again, I could see those guys, flipping spots. I have Waller for a 19% target share. So I'm actually a bit ahead of you. I'm glad you alluded to, the Giants being this run leading offense, which they were last year. They finished 25th in the NFL in pass attempts last season. They were 24th in pass rate over expected. Maybe they pass a little more this season, with Daniel Jones in his second season or Dable. But to me, it's still a Saquon Barkley led offense. I don't think you're going to get a huge increase in pass volume.
Yeah, pass volume, I think I have him projected for like 554 passing attempts, which is, I think, like bottom 10 in the league still.
Yep.
It's just the expected pass play is just not there for this team. And maybe they try to get that going more in year 2 with Dable and Daniel Jones as they get more chemistry together. And I think they leaned pretty heavily on the run game. I think that we might see a little bit more balanced, but I would not expect them to be, top 15 in the league in that category at all.
I want to also touch on DJ Moore. Billy and I think, are a little bit apart on DJ Moore. Where do you have DJ Moore right now, Billy? It's wide receiver 30 something, correct?
So he came in with the move. I had him prior to the move. He was like wide receiver 21. After the move, he came in at wide receiver 30. And it just breaks down again to the expected pass attempts. I mean, Chicago was, bottom 3 in the league. And I know we're going to see efficiencies, but I accounted for those efficiencies, and we're still going to see a low pass attempts inside this offense. Add in now that he has some competition in targets where he hasn't really in the past. And I have some concerns about him. When I even take a look at the projections and just the raw stats, I have him projected for 26.5% of the target share, which is roughly 137 targets. He hasn't had a great catch percentage through his career. I even gave him a bump in that category up to 59%, which is high now for him from his averages, right? It gives him 80 receptions. I gave him a bump in yards per reception, which gave him a little over 1,000 yards. And then I even gave him a bump in touchdown percentage, which took him a little over 6, which would be, I think, his career high, right? Or at least tied with what he's done. And so there's a lot of questions with DJ Moore. I get this offense is looking better than it has, and it's a better offense than what he's been on, but I just don't know if they have enough pass attempts to really support him as a top 24 receiver anymore.
And I'll take, before you answer, Jared, I'm taking the kind of the devil's advocate approach where I believe that players dictate the schemes and the touches. And I think DJ Moore, he's the kind of talent where, you reference the target competition. I don't think those guys are the kind of players that are going to take away from DJ Moore. I think that if he's somehow settles into wide receiver 30 in ADP, I'm going to have a lot of him. I think that we kind of beat up these guys because of the potential bad situations a little too much. Amari Cooper last year, DK Metcalf last year, Brandon Cooks in 2021. I'm not saying he's Stephon Diggs, but Stephon Diggs was wide receiver 28 in that 2020 magical year. Where are you at on a player like DJ Moore in Chicago, Jared?
Yeah, I'm very close to Billy here. I actually have Billy beat by 1. I have DJ Moore wide receiver 31 right now, which feels horrible. I wish I could rank him higher, but and I mean, Billy nailed it. And this is why doing projections is so important. And by the way, projections are not the end all be all. There's so much subjectivity that goes into them. If you're right, and if Chicago passes at a league average rate, then DJ Moore is going to smash where Billy and I have him ranked. And we do floor and ceiling projections on Draft Sharks too, that everyone can see, and those are super important to look at. But yeah, I'm on board with Billy here. I mean, the Bears had the they had, they were dead last in pass attempts last season, but it wasn't even close. 38 fewer pass attempts than any other team last season. So, I have them projected for 64 more pass attempts this season. That still only gets them to 441 total, which is not a lot. And Theo, I'm with you. I mean, I think DJ Moore is going to dominate target share. I think Billy agrees with us, right? Billy, you have him at 26.5%.
Yep.
I have him at 27%. That's a huge target share, but 27% of 440, it's still not a huge number.
I'm going to go with the unanalytical pie grows larger argument, guys. You cannot beat the pie grows larger argument in fantasy football. Billy, go ahead. You had one more thing to say?
Yeah, I was going to say, I even gave him a larger bump than Jared did. Right? I took him just above 500 attempts, which is a very aggressive inside the expected pass attempts from this volume. I do expect him to be on the field more. I expect him to complete more third downs, but still, this is a run first team, and we're going to see them, with Fields continue to run the ball. And they brought in another ground and pound back. They still have Khalil Herbert. They're still going to run the ball between those three backs. And I think it might be a stretch for them to get above 500 attempts. I do. I think they're going to be probably in the high fours. But this was me trying to be generous here, right? And I think even though these are my mean projections, this might be the ceiling projection for this offense with pass attempts.
And the record show, Billy is so down on Deonta Foreman, he won't even say his name. He just says his archetype. He will just refer to him by his archetype, ground and pound guy. Jared, one wide receiver, which, anybody who's been listening to First Class Fantasy or the Dominator or the Sonic Truth podcast knows that we're very high on Chris Olave, and we expect a lot out of him. What do you think the Derek Carr impact is going to be with Olave and the Saints this year?
Yeah, and I'm very high on Chris Olave too. I mean, to me, he had a better rookie season than Garrett Wilson even. Now I'm gonna sound like a broken record here, I feel like, but my concern with Olave is, again, the offensive environment, like it is for DJ Moore, and it's nowhere near as extreme in New Orleans. But last year the Saints were 29th in situation neutral pace. They were 30th in situation neutral pass rate, 26th in pass rate over expected. So it was a slow paced, run heavy offense. Even is Derek Carr going to change that a ton? I don't think he's good enough to turn them into a team that's going to be top 10 in pass rate. I do have them projected to throw more this season, and I like Olave. I think he's fairly priced. I don't think you're getting a bargain on him, but I have no issue with where he's going in ADP. My only hesitation is I just don't think this is going to be a high octane offense in New Orleans, even with Derek Carr.
Yeah, I think that for me, it's Derek Carr has been able to elevate his pass catchers every single year. Devontae Adams last year, Hunter Renfrow finished inside the wide receiver 1 line. He was like wide receiver 11. And then those 2 seasons where you referenced Darren Waller, that was also with Derek Carr as his primary weapon. So I'm very, very excited. I think the offense aside, I think that the chances of Chris Olave beating his ADP is safe. I think he could be like wide receiver 8 when the season's over. Billy, anything to add on our Olave love fest?
Yeah, I did give this offense a slight uptick in pass attempts. I think I added 30 for the year. When we look at Derek Carr, I think we'll see a little bit more efficiencies. Derek Carr in general just throws the ball more than what we've seen the Saints do the past couple of years. I think the biggest question, and I think this is going to be the part that's going to really affect Chris Olave in 2023 more than anything, more than Derek Carr, more than the coaching scheme, is going to be Michael Thomas and how much Michael Thomas is on the field. Because if we do get, close to a full season from Michael Thomas, then I think I might have Chris Olave over projected from a target share standpoint. However, where Michael Thomas is at this point in his career, I don't expect him to play the full season. And we're already seeing he's already having a toe issue again, right? And so if we do know that Michael Thomas is going to miss 4-6 games, whatever it may be,
play 4-6 games.
Yeah, exactly, right? If we could project that out accurately today, I would argue that Chris Olave should be probably around 1 pick because they don't have the depth at the wide receiver position to really support any other weapon, because we still have a looming suspension for Alvin Kamara, who could technically be, 80 targets, 70 targets if he plays the whole season. And so there's a lot of uncertainty inside this offense, and we might see this perfect storm like we did last year with Josh Jacobs, where everything went wrong for it to go right for him, where it might happen in this regard with the wide receiver here with Chris Olave. I mean, think about Michael Thomas being gone. Think about Alvin Kamara being gone, right? Now they have Jamal Williams, who is, going to be the goal line back. Now, tight end wise, great. They got Juwan Johnson, but Taysom Hill is probably been running the ball. So there's not a lot of pass attempts that's going to be eaten out of this pie for Chris Olave if everything kind of goes wrong for the Saints for it to go right for him. So I think he could smash ADP. There's a lot of uncertainty.
Every offseason we seem to talk about the Dallas Cowboys. It's just a high profile team with an owner that's very much involved, to say the least. And we had the initial kind of gross out from the Mike McCarthy taking over a bigger part of the offensive scheme role, Kellen Moore moving on, and Schottenheimer taking over as OC. But I feel like the narrative's kind of changed a little bit. I kind of like what's going on in Dallas, where they move on from Zeke Elliott. You have Dalton Schultz leaving for Houston, you add Brandon Cooks, and now the Michael Gallup looks healthy. What are your expectations for this offense, Jared, this year? Are you bullish on the Cowboys right now, or are you bearish?
Yeah, I mean the OC change has me a little nervous. And for me, it's not the run pass split I'm worried about. Dallas was run heavy last season. They were at 52% pass for the season only. They were 25th in pass rate over expected. So I don't think they're going to go run. I haven't projected to even throw at a higher clip this season than last. The one thing that worries me about the shift from Kellen Moore to Brian Schottenheimer, the Cowboys were top 2 in situation neutral pace in each of the past 3 seasons under Kellen Moore. Brian Schottenheimer's last 3 Seahawks offenses finished 18th, 24th, and 22nd in pace. And then even if you want to look at Mike McCarthy, his last 3 Green Bay offenses, his last 3 offenses without Kellen Moore were 19th, 25th, and 20th in pace. So, under Kellen Moore, we could rely on the Cowboys being this high volume, fast paced offense. I don't think that's going to be the case this season, which, takes the luster off these guys at least a little bit.
Theo, I like this guy. We should get Jared on all the time because I'm agreeing with everything he has said today.
Guy's sharp. He's sharp.
We talked about the reasons why I was high on the Chargers, right? And it's the same thing that he just talked about. I mean, Kellen Moore's offensive, this is the reason why I'm lower in general on the offense outside of Zeke for Dallas. But Kellen Moore from 2019 to 2022, second in total offense, second in total yards per game, third in points per game, third in first downs, third in EPA per play, and fourth in third down percentage. So I'm really high on the Chargers this year. I think that Cowboys made a mistake by letting him go. I really do.
They were absolutely stupid.
Oh, he was the scapegoat is what it was.
It's ridiculous.
And quite frankly, that should have been McCarthy, and Moore should have been, honestly, in my opinion, promoted, but that's the whole nother story. But I think that when we look at Dallas in general, it's pretty clear to say that they look to be throwing more here in 2023. They bring in Brandon Cooks, right? They kept Tony Pollard, who's been, electric in the passing game and just explosive in general. They still have Lamb, who was just phenomenal last year. I would expect this team to really lean into the passing game this year. I think it's going to depend on the draft and who they take as that RB2, but I do see kind of a more 2-down back that they're going to take inside the draft here and then lean on Tony Pollard for his explosiveness and ability in the passing game, and then lean on, Brandon Cook's addition, lean on Lamb, and then Gallup as their wide receiver 3. So I still like this offense, but I would have liked it so much more had Kellen Moore stayed.
And let's stay with Dallas. And this is a follow-up, Jared. I think Tony Pollard right now is kind of a litmus test. He's going around like the early round 3. He's going right around, let's call him running back 11-ish, running back 12. Last year he finished as running back 8. Zeke is completely out of the way. Before the NFL draft, do you think that Pollard is a value here, or do you have big trepidations that they're going to do something in the NFL draft that could maybe hurt him?
I'm in on Pollard. I have him RB9 right now, and even my projections there are even a bit conservative in case they do add a running back, say on day 2, which I think is possible. I don't know if I necessarily consider it likely. I think they're going to add something, but it definitely could be a day 3 guy. I had this note in my 105 Things article, but Tony Pollard has top 50% snap rate in 11 career games. He's averaged 19.2 PPR points in those 11 games. And I think that's, the type of workload he's going to get this season. So I'm definitely in on Pollard.
Guess where I have him in my running back rankings, Jared?
RB9.
RB9.
Nice.
I've said that I think that I agree with you, Jared. I think that they're going to add a running back on day 2, but I don't think, besides like Jahmyr Gibbs, I don't think there's like a bunch of running backs that could take away Pollard as a receiver. And also the fact that we have no Dalton Schultz. I like Lamb and Pollard as familiar targets for Dak Prescott being great values. I think when we get down to it and we're drafting FFPC main events at the end of the summer, I think it's going to be such a common start to have like Justin Jefferson at the 1 with Tony Pollard at that 2-3 turn. I think that's going to be like, if he's there, I think that's going to be like a very common one. And I wouldn't be surprised if he sneaks into like 20, 21, 22 territory.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'd be comfortable drafting him in the middle of round 2, barring someone like Gibbs, or I guess maybe Charbonnet might worry me a little more. But if he avoids those 2 guys and Bijan, obviously I'd feel comfortable with him as a mid round 2 pick.
Yeah, and definitely check out our show with Dwayne McFarland from yesterday, where we hit on a number of these rookies. But today we're hitting on some veterans, guys, and I want to just get Jared's. We all play FFPC, we all enjoy it. What is your current FFPC redraft top 5, Jared? Let's call it for main. Let's say if it's an FFPC main event, how are you going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
Yeah, I have it Jefferson, Tyreek, Chase, Kelsey, Cup.
Okay, Kelsey, Cup, and no running back in there.
No running back in there. I'd have a running back at 6.
McCaffrey.
Eckler.
Oh, okay. Love it. So for the record, Jared Smola is a zero RB guy this year.
You have him like 7, 8 CMC?
He's my he's my RB2, so he'd be probably right behind Eckler there. Yep.
Billy, go ahead and name your top 5 right now for FFPC.
I have Jefferson, Chase, CMC, Kelsey, and then I have Tyreek. And I think you could argue Eckler in there as well as 5.
So I have Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Travis Kelsey, then Tyreek Hill at 4, but I could, him and Kelsey to me are flip-flop, and then CMC at 5. Just curious, Jared, you push Cooper Kupp in there. Do you have any like hesitation because of the quality of the offense? The fact that he played half the year last year, like we love Kupp, and talk about 25 points a game, 22 points a game, but we do have question marks about the Rams. Are you think that that's correct, or?
It's definitely a fair concern. Questions about the Rams, question about Kupp coming off that injury. God, he was better in 8 games last year than he was in 2021. More targets per game, more catches per game, better yards per route run last year than he had in 2021. So, there were no signs of slowing down. So I do have some of those concerns baked into my projections, but he still comes out wide receiver 4 for me because I think he's going to still see so much volume, and he's still going to be well above average in terms of the efficiency stuff.
Stick with Austin Eckler. So Eckler is your RB1. Billy, where do you have Eckler finishing among your RB rankings right now?
I have him pretty solid at RB2. I have him about 20, a little over 20 points over Jonathan Taylor as RB3.
And Jared, how close are CMC and Eckler in your rankings?
Yeah, they're within 10 points. Let me pull it up again. Yeah, they're 8 points apart.
You're just you kind of see a repeat here with Eckler. You have promise with the Chargers offense. What's kind of pushing him up to RB1?
Oh, yeah, I'm definitely big on the Chargers offense for all the reasons Billy said. I have been for the past few years. It's burned me at times, but I'm definitely in on the Chargers again. And Eckler is so funny because before I actually did projections, I thought I was going to be below market on him. Then you sit down and do him and look at what he did last year. I mean, Eckler's role last year was absurd. He had 127 targets. That was 19 more than any other running back. He scored 18 touchdowns, right, which feels unsustainable, and it probably is. I don't have him projected for 18 again. But Austin Eckler had 17.5 expected touchdowns last year. So like he didn't even really overachieve the role he was given, the touchdown opportunity he received. So like I don't know. I mean, and I have, you know, his efficiency coming down a little, and you know, maybe the change in OC adds some risk to his role changing. But I think that's unlikely. And if, you know, he's in anything close to the role he had last year, I feel really good about him as, you know, like a middle of the first round pick.
I love it. And that kind of ruins my next question where I had an Eckler linked in. So we'll leave Eckler out of this equation here. Right now, the back half of the first round in like the Never Too Early tournament for FFPC, you're seeing Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, and let's push Bijan Robinson into this equation. Of these three running backs, who would you be most comfortable selecting at cost, and who would you be least comfortable selecting? Bijan, Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor.
And do you want ADPs on those right now?
They're close. Like, Billy, correct me if I'm wrong. It's like 8, 10, 12.
Yeah, JT 7.8 right now. Saquon Barkley 10.9. Bijan is 14.2. So all very close.
Yeah. And that's the order I have these guys in. Sorry to be boring, but I do have, you know, JT 3, Barkley 4, Bijan 5. JT, I still think he's just such a massive talent. I don't know if people have forgot about it because he had the injury stuff last year. I do think the Colts offense is going to bounce back. You know, we'll see what they do at quarterback in the draft, but you know, I like Steichen there. I think the O-line is still good enough. It's not what it was, you know, 2 or 3 years ago, and then Taylor even has shown more in the passing game than I think we, you know, thought might be the case when he was coming into the league. So he's not going to be Austin Eckler and catch 80 passes, but I think if he's healthy, he could catch 50 or 60 pretty easily.
And they have no Hines.
No Hines. Yep.
That was kind of my argument last week. Is I don't love drafting him in that in that range just because of the quality of the wide receiver position, and I see him as more of a guy that's going to average. If it works out, I think he's more of a 17 point per game guy than a guy who's going to go north of 20. And I think that the number of those wide receivers there have that in their outcome. So he's interesting. Want to stick with changes this offseason. We finally saw Tom Brady move on from Tampa Bay. Do you think we've reached a point, guys? This is for both of you guys, that Tampa Bay skill position players are maybe too beat up right now, or are they not beat up enough? Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Billy, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm looking at about wide receiver 28 and about wide receiver 33.
I'm loading the receivers right now. Godwin is going as FFPC 50.5. Evans is going a 73.2 right now.
Yeah, so it's about right with 28 and 33. Let's call them both inside of the wide receiver 3 line. Godwin, people are a little bit more bullish, and I think they're really betting against Mike Evans. Your thoughts on those two guys, Jared?
Yeah, I have Godwin a few spots higher than ADP. I have Evans like right at ADP. I'm less worried about the quarterback play in Tampa and more worried about the general offensive environment. I guess that's kind of been the theme of this show today. But I mean, so Tampa over the last 4 seasons, they have ranked 4th, 6th, 1st, and then 1st in pass attempts. They've also been top 4 in the NFL in total plays in 3 of those 4 seasons. I think that's going to change drastically with no Tom Brady this season. I think the plays are coming down. I think the pass rate is coming down. So I have them projected for 114 fewer pass attempts this season than they had last season, which is just massive.
What's the number you have them for?
I'll pull it up. I had the 114 in my notes. So I have Tampa for 556 pass attempts.
I'm 568, so we're really close.
Yeah. That's just huge. That's just so many targets going away for these guys.
Yeah, if we would have kept the same trajectory, it would have been like high sixes.
Right.
Well, let me ask you guys this. Since I think that the argument is, to me, it's that Baker can't support 2 wide receivers. It's just difficult to see that. Do you think it could be that one of them becomes a much better value? And which one would you rather have? Chris Godwin at wide receiver 28 or Mike Evans at wide receiver 33? Start with Jared.
I'd rather take Godwin. I like Godwin at that price. Evans is fine. Like if he slips past it, I might take him. But I think, not to say Evans is done, But I just think, at his age, we've seen the best from Mike Evans. I think we maybe have not seen the best from Chris Godwin yet, considering his age, considering the fact, he's another year removed from the ACL now.
Billy?
Yeah, I would like to start off by saying that I'm higher on both these than the community is in general. I think this is one of those things where I think the weapons will elevate the quarterback play, right? Evans is although he is getting up in age, he's still 6'5", right? He's still 230 pounds, where somebody like Baker can just throw it up to him and Evans can go up and get that contested catch. I do agree with Jared, though, that I prefer Chris Godwin, though, because we're going to see anytime a quarterback struggles, and we know Baker has struggled in his career, we'll tend to lean on, the underneath routes, the short intermediate route trees. And I think that will benefit Chris Godwin. Plus, he's younger. He's a little bit more athletic. He's going to be able to get more separation. So I think that will benefit Chris Godwin more. Honestly, I think this is why I'm so high on Rachaad White as well, is the dump offs that we're probably going to see in this offense and the usage from the run game. I think they're going to lean a little bit more this way than they have in the past. And so that's why I'm as high as I am on White, but I would agree with Jared. Chris Godwin is the receiver to own in this wide receiver core.
And let's make that 3 for 3, because I also do like Godwin right there. And I would have, Evans seems like the kind of guy that when he falls off, he's going to really, really fall off. And you just can't ever predict it in the NFL. If they were a more normal franchise, I feel like he would have gotten traded. Let's trade Mike Evans to Jared's Buffalo Bills and let's have a nice bounce. That would be a wonderful pickup. But let's stick with Rachaad White, because that's a guy that I'll agree with Billy. I'm very bullish on him. Let's call him about running back 25. Last year we saw a massive amount. It's obviously a Tom Brady effect, but there was a massive amount of targets to the running back position, but a lot of them left with Leonard Fournette. And we saw Rachaad White flash, showing his receiving skills at a young age. Yep. What are your thoughts on him this year? Do you think he could be a value here at RB25, or is he limited by the offense?
I'm high on White right now too. And I say right now because I'm really curious to see what the NFL draft is going to bring to that back. But I have Rachaad White RB18 right now in full PPR. Now if I'm drafting today, I probably wouldn't draft him quite that high because I'm a bit worried that they add something else. But if we get through day 2 and they don't add anything, White's probably going to stay around RB18 for me. I feel comfortable that he is a strong pass catching back. He looked like a strong pass catching back coming into the league last year. He had nice, raw receiving numbers last year. You look at stuff like yards per route run and Pro Football Focus receiving grade. He fared well in those metrics last year. As a runner, he was bad last year. And I know it was a tough situation in Tampa. Fournette wasn't good either. The O-line had a bunch of injuries. But so among 151 running backs with 90 plus carries last season, White ranked 46th in PFF rushing grade, 41st in elusive rating, 45th among those 51 in rush yards over expected per attempt. So again, that's what I'm saying. I wouldn't be surprised if Tampa adds something else to the backfield to compete with White, at least for those early down snaps.
Yeah, I mean, he survived free agency with only Chase Edmonds there. But yeah, it's kind of like a Matthew McConaughey True Detective meme for any Rachaad White Dynasty manager guy, pretty much the entire first round with Bijan. And then day 2, there's some guys that could really, really hurt Rachaad White. So let's hope if you're a Rachaad White manager that nobody's drafted until day 3. I think if they do that, then they're pretty big on Rachaad White. Billy and I have been, we talked about Olave, but pretty much every single show we somehow talk about the second-year wide receivers because it's such a fantastic group of them, and we view a lot of them as values at ADP. But sometimes it doesn't work out with the whole second-year wide receivers or cheat code narrative. Last year, we saw Devonta Smith absolutely crush his ADP, but when these guys miss, they really miss. Brandon Ayuk and Chase Claypool were both drafted as wide receiver 2s in 2021. We all saw what happened with Deebo Samuel, and Chase Claypool obviously fell off that year. We all saw Laviska Shenault also steamed up. He was a very popular guy late in the summer. He was going as like a high-end wide receiver 3. Pour one out for all our Laviska Shenault, hopes and dreams. Last year, Kadarius Toney and Elijah Moore were like disastrous guys, and a lot of high-stakes people pushed them up, where Andrew Schellenberg and I actually had a 20-minute conversation about Devonta Smith versus Kadarius Toney one night in like a slow football guys draft, and it's hilarious at this point. All those picks really hurt drafters. which of the second round wide receivers do you think could really come back to burn people right now? Because it's easy to like a lot of them.
Yeah. I hate that this is my answer, but I have Drake London here. I don't think he's going to burn people. I don't think he's going to, be Kadarius Toney or Elijah Moore. I'm 8 spots lower than ADP.
Where do you have him?
8 spots lower than ADP, whatever that is. Like mid 20s. Let me pull it up.
I'm at 26, and I've been getting pushed back.
I'm 27. And again, same theme. It's the Falcons' offense.
Yep, it's
They
run
were
first.
31st in pass attempts last year, 31st in pass rate, over expected, and Art Smith is still there. He's not going to air it out. I mean, they might
they're
throw
drafting
more,
Bijan.
and if they draft Bijan, London is in serious trouble.
And they also are now rumored to be heavily involved with drafting a wide receiver in the second round. And there's some Atlanta media people saying that they might be the landing spot for DeAndre Hopkins. It's just sick stuff. I love Drake.
You know what that
I
is,
really
right?
hope
They need to be able to deter from the run game. So they're just going to have everyone run so they can run.
It's like a kid's flag football offense. You just have everybody run straight lines and then hand it to the fast guy, Bijan Robinson. Billy, this is a depressing conversation because we don't really want to pour water on any of these guys. Who could be the one that could really burn people this year?
I think it could be Pickens, and we're starting to see the ADP already correct the last days since Allen Robinson news. But I think that signals that they don't fully trust him as the number 2 right now. I mean, it's clear that Deontay Johnson has been the number 1. This offense commands a target share, and Allen Robinson isn't what he has been in his career. He's in the words of Theo, dusted now. But I would say that any addition to the receiving core in this offense is not a good thing for Pickens. His ability to be able to kind of beat defenders and be stronger and win on contested catches, that's what he's now going to have to rely on, where we were hoping for an increase in volume. I don't think we're going to see the increase that we were probably projecting, as of last week or even earlier this week. And we had to make those adjustments. And I think that overall it's going to hinder his ability to potentially break out in 2023.
Shout out to Jason Allwine. Pickens and Chase are the only wide receivers under 24 that had 90% route participation in 2022. So Jason is not on that call, Billy. This is really.
I would
really
also
difficult.
like to state, though, that Jason compared Christian Watson to Randy Moss. So we'll just leave that out there.
That's spicy, Jason. That is spicy. This is really difficult because I feel like a lot of the guys. I feel like it's more of you have to have a certain level of risk tolerance with all of these players because you have less of a sample size. It's a guy that I'm actually very bullish on, but I'll present kind of a counter argument. I think Treylon Burks is really going to hit this year. I think he's going to have a big target share, and I think he's going to be a guy who returns value at ADP. But I could see things really, really falling apart in Tennessee, and Treylon Burks would also sink with the ship. So he's a guy that I have more faith in as a dynasty asset than I do a redraft asset this year, despite all the vacated targets. But it's depressing for me to even talk about this one, guys. Wanted to also talk about just a macro level stuff. Last week we had Mike Leone on, and this was a very interesting topic. Every offseason we talk about like trying to find values at these positions, but I think if we take a step back and just identify breakout offenses, all the players kind of rise with these explosive offenses. Philadelphia last year is a great example of this, where you saw Jalen Hurts beat his ADP, Devonta Smith beat his ADP, AJ Brown crushes ADP, Dallas Goedert crushes ADP, Miles Sanders crushes ADP. If you just took Philadelphia Eagles, you were in a good spot. What are some offenses right now, Jared, that you think are going to vastly improve from last year, where you could see the players just kind of rising with the tide?
So my big one is the Browns. I'll leave the.
That was mine, Jared. You just took. You're too sharp. We can't have this guy on anymore. But that's a great answer. Go with that.
Yeah, and the Browns passing game specifically. I just think they're about to make a pretty big shift towards the pass. You just look at the moves they've made. Obviously, the big Deshaun Watson move. They trade for Amari Cooper. They give David Njoku a big contract. They trade for Elijah Moore this offseason. They haven't re-signed Kareem Hunt yet. So
and they're not. They've clarified. They said he's slow. They said we're not bringing him back. He's lost a step, which was ice cold, but it's a great sign. I love it. Yeah,
so I just think this is going to be Deshaun Watson's offense. And speaking of Watson, it was ugly last year. I get that, but I'm still a believer. I mean, this guy was out of football for what, like 2 years. Then he comes in mid-season in a new offense with all these new weapons. Like, I wasn't surprised he struggled, but I think he's going to bounce back in a big way in 2023.
Love it. I love that answer. I think that the writing's on the wall with what they're going to do. I think Nick Chubb becomes a very good value just based on the opportunities he's going to have inside the red zone. I love your bullish take on Njoku. We already saw Amari Cooper last year, and then Elijah Moore could bounce back. It's an offense I want to bet on as well. Billy, we're going to take away your number one answer because last week you talked about the Chargers at length. Give me another offense, another offense that you're bullish on, because I'm going to have to pivot now too.
I was going to say the Chargers again.
I'll go first.
Go ahead.
So I briefly touched on, I think Chicago. I think Chicago is going to make massive leaps forward. I think that's kind of a cheap answer because they were so poor last year, but I think it could be dramatic where I think they could take a massive leap forward. It's going to be Eberflus's second year. It's going to be Justin Fields with more experience in the offense and having the same offensive scheme is going to be big for Justin Fields. They added Chase Claypool to end last year. I love the overall speed at the wide receiver position. They bring in Robert Tonyan as a tight end too. I like that. And I like the fact that they have a dual threats at running back with the player I can't talk about and Khalil Herbert, Billy's favorite running back in the league. So I'll say Chicago as a team that makes a dramatic leap forward in terms of scoring. I think they can move up like 12 spots in terms of like points per game.
Thanks for not saying his name. That's appreciated.
I can't. I'm not allowed to.
It's like saying Lord Voldemort. You know, you just can't say it.
There you go. You can't say Voldemort.
For me, it's the Lions. If I can't say the Chargers, and I like what the Lions did, right? And I've talked about this on previous pods, and I just like what Dan Campbell has done with this team and what the team in general has done. Campbell's brought grit to this team, right? And we joke around and talk about them biting kneecaps all the time, but it's a real thing when you are able to change the culture of a team. And they had this losing mentality, and we saw that changing last year. And people have heard me say I threw $100 on them win a division last year. Now it looks like they might actually be the favorites this year to win the division. So we look at what they've done, though. That grit has transpired into culture. And we've seen that result down the stretch where they went 8-2 to finish their last 10 games in 2022. I think that carries over. I love the fact they went out and they added another, dynamic back. I think that dynamic, I say with kind of a, emphasis. I want to put the, quotations here because he's more skilled than Jamal Williams was, but now they have a good combination between David Montgomery and DeAndre Swift. Both are going to be, capable in the passing game. Jameson Williams now hoping to see a full healthy season, who's going to be able to stretch the field, right? They still have Amon-Ra St. Brown. We talked about him earlier in the podcast, who has just been, anything short but magnificent here. And then, I love the veteran signing where they go out and bring back Marvin Jones. You know me, I've been a Marvin Jones fan for years.
Billy, you have to talk about Marvin Jones literally every single show.
I do. Yeah. I gotta
That's your guy.
I mean, round 20 picking best ball, you can pick a lot worse, I think. And you literally have to scroll to find him in a lot of these apps to be able to take him in round 20. But when you're looking at we're looking at a couple spike weeks, you're going to get it, right? He's going to have those 2-3 games where he's going to score a touchdown, have 60, 70 yards or whatever it may be. And it's going to pay off. But I won't go into, we can do a whole pod on Marvin Jones another time. I'm not going to do that. But I think in general, this offense is on the rise, and that grit has not only carried over from the defense, but also to the offense. And we're going to see them continue to climb inside the overall charts. I'm
going to reach out to Marvin Jones himself for that 1 hour Marvin Jones appreciation pod.
I love it.
I bet we can get him for that one. Billy and Jared, we're almost at an hour here. So we're not quite lightning, but we're almost lightning round. Tiers are very important, but selecting the correct player is still the name of the game, especially when it comes to the wide receiver position. We see two pockets in the early draft where there are wide receiver clusters. Jared, choose one player: Stephon Diggs, CeeDee Lamb, or Devontae Adams.
I have CeeDee Lamb ranked just ahead of Stephon Diggs. 28% target share last year, set career highs in yards per out run and PFF receiving grade. I'm not saying Diggs and Adams are falling off a cliff, but there's more of a risk of decline with those guys than CeeDee Lamb, who there's a good chance he's still getting better at this point.
Billy, we already touched on Devontae Adams versus CeeDee Lamb. Throw Stephon Diggs in that mix. Which of these three would you take?
I have Lamb ranked ahead of all of them. I think he's my wide receiver 4 or 5.
I'm on Lamb as well. I love him. I think that we talked about Dallas offense. We're all on Lamb there. Okay, this one becomes a little more interesting. And it's a little bit larger of a grouping here. A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jalen Waddle, and then the up-and-coming Garrett Wilson. Jared, pick one of these four.
Yeah, it's St. Brown for me. I have him ranked highest, and it's the volume we talked about before, and I have him projected for significantly more targets than these other guys.
I was going to say you probably could have put him in with the previous group, and I would have taken him
Yes.
ahead of one, or if not two of them.
Yeah, I've made the argument for taking Amon-Ra St. Brown in the first round plenty of times, and I like that. Billy and I, we actually did that when we did our show where we best balled. But to me, A.J. Brown, the fact that it's year 2, he could just go nuclear. And I think we're going to see better game scripts because Philadelphia's lost so much on the defensive side of the ball. Here's a very interesting cluster, and these guys are almost going side by side, and it's followed up by a tier break. So this one we really want to nail. DK Metcalf, Chris Olave, T. Higgins. Jared, give me one that you want from these three.
Yeah, I have no strong take here, but I have DK Metcalf ranked highest among these three. He actually got unlucky in the touchdown department last season. He tied for 19th among wide receivers in actual touchdowns. He was 3rd among wide receivers in expected touchdowns. He was getting those end zone and those red zone targets. So I have some concerns about Geno Smith. He did tail off over the second half of last season, but DK is just so good. I don't think it's going to matter a whole lot.
I have Olave again with the previous group, so I actually have him 5 points ahead of Garrett Wilson. I have him ahead of Jalen Waddle. I have DK Metcalf half a point behind T. Higgins right now. That's where I think the conversation gets interesting. I agree with Jared here. He did get unlucky in touchdown department. However, I do kind of project Geno to regress this year, and that's why I have him as wide receiver number 15.
Yeah, I think it's an important tier to hit, and I think all three of them are going to have nice seasons. But I'm on Olave. I just think he's going to be a rocket ship this year, and I think he takes a big step forward. Calvin Ridley or Christian Kirk, Jared? If you could roster one Jacksonville Jaguars wide receiver, which one are you going with?
I'm taking shots on Ridley right now, and Kirk's definitely safer. We haven't seen Ridley. I'm in the wrong spot. I just think Ridley has a better chance to emerge as a true alpha in Jacksonville because we've seen him do it, right? Last 2 times we saw Calvin Ridley, 24.7 and 25.9% target shares. Christian Kirk has topped out at 23.3%. He was at 22.3% last year. And Calvin Ridley, go back to 2020. I know it's a while ago now, but he had 2.44 yards per route run that season. That's a level Christian Kirk has never even sniffed. I think Kirk's a good player. I think he's a nice number 2 wide receiver in the NFL. If you're getting the 2020 or 2021 version of Calvin Ridley, I just think he's Jacksonville's best receiver.
I think that the bull argument for them is that they're close. And I think that Christian Kirk is getting drafted later. So I'll take the cheaper of the two. I think the more likely outcome is both of them are pretty good, but I'll take the cheaper one who's younger. And we already saw him, have success with Trevor Lawrence. Billy, you're on that same train, or is there anything else?
Yeah, this actually blew up on Twitter on the main post for Player Profiler when I said that Ridley was the B in this offense and that Christian Kirk was the A. I have a lot of concerns when someone hasn't played football in a year and a half, right? We haven't seen him come back since I think week 7, 2021. In that time, he was on a different offense, a different division with a different coach, a different quarterback. All those things have changed. And whenever I do projections, if I have any one of those being listed, it's typically a downgrade inside my projections for an individual, right? If you have a new quarterback, there's going to be some chemistry concerns. If you're in with a new coach and you still have your same quarterback, there's going to be some hiccups in the offense kind of clicking, right? If you have a new team and all these new things as well, you have to consider all of those factors with a new division. And so there's a lot of those red flags that I ignored on some players last year that ended up biting me, where I went against my own rule and it hurt me. I'm going back to it this year and saying, I'm not going to ignore these red flags. And there's something to be said about being in shape. And there's something to be said about being in NFL shape and being up to game speed. And I know that Ridley has been keeping himself in shape. However, I think that is not quite to the same level as being a game ready. I think he's going to have some rust. We look at what Deshaun Watson did last year. I know it's a different position, and I know people are going to say you can't compare the two because one's playing quarterback and has to learn schemes and the offense and know all the defense and thing. I understand that, but there's a lot of similarities as well of having rust and be able to, get back on the field and get back in the swing of things. And so, the receiver still has to look at the defenders and know which way and some routes, which way he's going to go. And so there's going to be a lot of miscommunication, I think, in this offense at first with Ridley and with Trevor Lawrence. I do think that he's going to be fine, but we also have to look back and say when he was very successful, Julio Jones was also still Julio Jones-ish, right? He wasn't Julio Jones we know of today, to where he actually took on a lot of the defensive attention, where Ridley was able to run pretty wild against the number 2 or even sometimes, the number 3 in that defense. So there was times where he was beating people who were maybe less than stellar, where if he's technically labeled as the 1, he's going to be facing off against the number 1 corner at times. And now at that point, again, he's 28. He's now past the age apex on a new team with a new coach, with a new division, with a lot of, hiccups. Can he beat that number 1 coverage and overcome all of these chemistry concerns? And that's why I'm lower on him versus consensus.
So we hit over an hour here. We're at an hour 05. Before we get out of here, last week, Mike Leone said Daniel Jones is the best quarterback value on the board right now in early best ball drafts. Billy was on Lamar Jackson and I was on Deshaun Watson. Where are you at, Jared, in terms of an early quarterback value?
I can't believe I'm going to end the show like this because my answer is so gross. But I'm way higher than ADP on Kenny Pickett.
It's the pass volume.
Yeah, that's part of it. So I think the volume is going to be solid. I like the weapons. I'm not including Allen Robinson because I think he's total toast. But I like Deontay and Pickens and Freiermuth and Najee and Jalen Warren. Like that's solid. Kenny Pickett can run a bit too, right? In his 10 full games last year, he averaged 4.5 carries per game, 19 rushing yards per game. That's pretty solid production. And did you guys know that Kenny Pickett led the NFL in PFF passing grade over the final 5 weeks of last season? It's a little funky. I don't buy it, but like he obviously improved throughout his rookie season, and he could take another step forward in year 2.
I love it. Kenny Pickett, that's a great value late, according to Jared Smola. Jared, let everybody know where they can find your awesome work and the pods you're going to be putting out.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at SmolaDS, and then all my work is at Draft Sharks. Again, all the 2023 projections and rankings are up there. So no matter what league you're drafting in, we got customized rankings for you.
Yeah, and I retweeted Jared's takeaways, or you can check that out from earlier today on my Twitter feed. Billy, what do you have coming up with the Dominator?
Dominator is tomorrow with Matt, but after this, like as soon as this ends, I'm about to record in about 10-15 minutes with Dario. And today it's not man versus machine, it's man and machine, because we agree on all these rankings, and we're going to talk about why ADP is wrong. I think that's Dario throwing in the hat because he's lost 3 debates straight, according to the polls. But that's another discussion. But man and machine today united, talking about why ADP is wrong and why the algorithm matches the man in the rankings.
And check out our show yesterday with Dwayne McFarland. It was a great one. We touched on a lot of the rookies for coming up in the NFL draft, Dwayne's favorite rookies to draft. And check out the Sonic Truth Dynasty podcast from last night. We had a mock draft special with Scott Connor, Jax Falcone, Memphis Young, Cody Carpenter. It was fantastic. Obviously, Matt and Alan as well. That was a great process. This was awesome today, guys. I'm Theo Greminger. Thanks to our guest, Jared Smola, and Billy Muzio, as always. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Hey, you like that video? Be sure to subscribe and activate those alerts so you get notified as soon as new videos drop. And be sure to check out playerprofiler.com. We have all the tools for you to dominate every type of fantasy league. We have a draft kit, Dynasty Deluxe, data analysis, DFS Dominator, and don't forget the player rankings to rule them all.